So it's 6 p.m. Chicago time. First of all, a happy new year to all of you. Hope you had a wonderful, restful holidays and are ready to start the new year. So this is our first webinar/event for ACM Chicago, as well as joined with IEEE Computer Society Chicago of this year of 2023. And so today we have a very, very exciting talk on the metaverse. So I'm sure, you know, some of you or maybe all of you have heard about this term metaverse. Why is it so popular? Well, because as you know, Facebook, right, renamed their brand from Facebook to become Meta because they're betting on the metaverse. So that's why they changed themselves to Meta, if you're not aware of that. So we thought it would be really interesting to have a talk on this metaverse, trying to debunk the myths behind metaverse, what it actually is it actually really coming or not? And so the title, as you see here, is that the metaverse is coming, but it could be dangerous. And we have our speaker tonight, who is Louis Rosenberg from Unanimous AI. So I'd like to thank the two hosts that we have here this evening of ACM Chicago. You can see there in the picture, the first photo there is Mark Temkin. He is our vice chair. We have on the second photo is Greg Newmark. He is the treasurer of ACM Chicago. And myself on the third, I am the chair of ACM Chicago and also chair of IEEE Computer Society Chicago chapter. And on the right is our vice chair for IEEE Computer Society Chicago, Gina Martinez. Welcome all of you to this webinar this evening. Just a bit of housekeeping notes before I hand it over to Mark to present our speaker. This webinar is being recorded, so you will get a copy of this recording. If you subscribe to our ACM Chicago YouTube video channel, then you will be able to see this when it gets uploaded there. And also as well, you'll get a copy of the slides that we have here, the introduction slides and Louis's slides too as well. And also as well, if you need to have a professional development hour certificate, if you're going for a professional engineering program or so, then we will also provide that as well. There'll be a link and then you could go ahead and download it if you need so. All right, without further ado, then I will hand it over to Vice Chair Mark to introduce our speaker for this evening.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's a great turnout. We're glad you're all here. Tonight's presentation is a great example of how we at the Chicago ACM look at various sources in finding the next topic and speaker that we present to you, our audience. So a few months ago, I was reading Barron's, which some of you may know is the weekly financial newspaper published by the Wall Street Journal, and found our speaker, Louis Rosenberg, in the guest editorial section. He had an article about the metaverse, about parts of this topic tonight. And it was great to see his contrary opinion. While everyone else has sort of written off the metaverse, that our speaker sees an inevitable future. So to hear more about that, let's welcome our speaker, Dr. Louis Rosenberg of Unanimous AI.
All right. Hopefully you can see that okay. So I'm Louis Rosenberg, CEO of Unanimous AI out here in California. I am also the chief scientist of a group called the Responsible Metaverse Alliance and the global technology advisor to a group called the XR Safety Initiative. And today I'm going to be talking about the metaverse is coming and it could be dangerous. And so a quick outline of what I'll be talking about. I'm going to start out with talking about why the metaverse is inevitable, and I will be referring to some of the many positives about the metaverse. I will also talk about why the metaverse is dangerous and be talking about some of the many dangers of the metaverse. And then I'll be talking about why the metaverse needs guardrails, which is, so that we can enable the positives and avoid the negatives. And so with all that said, I want to take a few minutes to talk about my background and how I got involved in the metaverse and why I've been thinking about these things for a very long time. So I got involved in the metaverse over 30 years ago, back at really at the beginning. I started as a researcher at Stanford and NASA working on virtual reality vision systems. I was studying how to improve depth perception in VR vision systems. I was immediately captivated by the possibilities. I was sure even back then that virtual reality was going to be significant to computing. But at the same time, I actually didn't like being cut off from the real world. It actually made me feel uncomfortable after an hour or so. And so what I really wanted to do, even back then in 91, was to take the power of VR and splash it all over the real world. And so I pitched that idea to the US Air Force, and they funded me to build something called the Virtual Fixtures Platform, which became the first functional mixed reality system where you could actually reach out and interact with both real and virtual objects at the same time in full 3D with haptic feedback touch. And so there's a picture of me in 92 before my hair started going gray. And it was a great experience. And it convinced me that virtual reality and augmented reality would eventually change the world. I didn't think it would take as long as it did. In fact, I was so sure that it was urgent that in 1993, I founded one of the early virtual reality companies, a company called Immersion Corporation. We created early VR technologies for medical training and entertainment and productivity. The company's actually still around today, but I left actually about 20 years ago, and I founded a company called Outland Research, an augmented reality company that developed geospatial media technology that was acquired by Google in 2011. And then I founded my current company, Unanimous AI, which is an artificial intelligence company. It's really pretty different. We use AI to connect people together in shared environments to make us smarter, to amplify our group intelligence. Rather than using AI to replace us or manipulate us, it's really about enhancing people. And I give this background because I'm really a big fan of the metaverse. I've been a fan for 30 years. I'm excited about the potential. I really do believe in its value. At the same time, I've gotten quite concerned about the risks, and I think the risks are significant. And I speak often about the risks, and I'll talk a lot about them today, so that we could aim for a metaverse that is positive for society. And so we can ask the question, well, what is the metaverse? Everybody has heard about the metaverse, certainly in the last year or so after Meta announced their name change. And people have seen the metaverse. People have kind of looked at it and say, well, what's so exciting about that? It looks, kind of lame. And I would say when people are thinking about the metaverse today, we should really think about the 2030s. And so when you think about the metaverse, it's not the cartoonish worlds with cartoonish avatars that people see today. If you're thinking 2030s, you really should think about the metaverse as an immersive world that's highly realistic, that's fully immersive, and is everywhere. And by everywhere, I mean it's both virtual and augmented worlds. And so when I think of the metaverse, I really think it's helpful to think about it in terms of the virtual metaverse and the augmented metaverse. And so the virtual metaverse is what you see a lot of people promoting over the last year or so, fully simulated worlds. I believe that by the 2030s, most people will spend a few hours a day in these fully simulated worlds for socializing, for entertainment, for shopping, for some experiences at work and other things. But I do believe that people don't like to spend long periods of time in these fully simulated worlds cut off from their surroundings. It's the same experience I had 30 years ago. Fully simulated worlds are great for limited duration activities, similar to how we today will sit down and watch a movie and lose ourselves for a couple hours. But after a while, you don't want to be cut off from the real world. And so I do believe that the real metaverse, the metaverse that really impacts our daily lives in a big way, will be the augmented metaverse. And using lightweight glasses that allow you to project virtual content into your view of the real world, people will be able to interact with a mixed reality of both their normal daily life and virtual content. And I believe that by the 2030s, this augmented metaverse will replace mobile phones as our primary interface with digital content. Instead of having carrying a phone around with you all day, you'll be wearing lightweight, stylish glasses that'll be made, to look the way Apple will make them look, and people will feel comfortable wearing them. And I believe that by the 2030s, people will look back at movies from the 2020s when they see people walking down the street with their neck bent, staring down at a phone, bumping into things, and they'll think that that looked pretty primitive, because why were people staring down at content in their hand when content should just be around you? It should just be seamlessly integrated into our world as a natural part of our experiences. And that's really what I believe the primary metaverse will be, this augmented world. Why is the metaverse inevitable? Well, I don't believe it's because of very specific products that are on the horizon. I don't believe it's because of very specific killer apps that are on the horizon. I believe the metaverse is inevitable really because of people. And I say that because the metaverse at its core is a deeply humanizing technology. And it's funny to say that, because very often you see somebody wearing, this big clunky VR headset, and you're watching them and you think like that doesn't look humanizing at all. That looks like, kind of creepy. And again, these technologies will get more and more invisible and they'll just look like glasses. But why is it a deeply humanizing technology? It's a deeply humanizing technology because the metaverse at its core presents information to people in the form that our perceptual system was meant to receive it, as immersive experiences that are spatially all around us. This is how we understand our world, as spatial experiences. It's how we explore our world. It's how we remember our world. Our memories are formed spatially. There's memory techniques called memory palace, where you put things in, because that's how our brains work. Our brains are spatial. We remember things spatially. We interact with our world spatially. We build empathy with other people through real face-to-face spatial interactions with people. And we build mental models about everything we experience spatially. So the metaverse will be a really powerful medium that finally allows people to interact with digital information the way our brain wants to interact with information. Because of that, it can impact us as deeply and as effectively as real experiences. And there's really positive things about that. But that same exact feature means it can also be a really dangerous medium. And so talking about the metaverse risks, I like to break it down into really three different categories: dangers from other users, dangers from bad actors, and dangers from big tech. And again, we're talking about in the 2030s when you are fully immersed in either virtual or augmented worlds and content is just all around us. So dangers from other users, these are problems that we know about very well today in traditional social media and social platforms. In the metaverse, there'll be problems of hate, harassment, bullying, assault, stalking, pedophilia, all these bad things, but they will be immersive. They will feel real. They will have a much deeper impact on us than today's flat environments. And that's dangerous. The solution is going to be platform moderation, meaning these large metaverse platforms are going to have to protect their users. The problem is that it's actually much more difficult to moderate the metaverse than it is to moderate social media, because the metaverse is a real-time environment. Everything happens in real time. In social media, platform moderation means preventing a piece of bad content from spreading too far. In the metaverse, platform moderation means preventing something bad from happening. That's almost impossible. And I often tell people to try like a thought experiment. Like imagine you're in a busy shopping mall and there's hundreds of people all around, and it's just chaos. And you say, okay, that's the real world. But in the 2030s, the metaverse will look that real. And it won't just be those hundreds of people you see. It'll be millions of people, 1 billion people. How is a platform supposed to moderate all of their behaviors? Almost impossible. And so that's one of the big challenges. AI is going to be a part of it for helping to keep people safe. But I think people underestimate the problem of platform moderation, because in their minds, they're thinking social media, which is already hard enough. And they're not realizing, no, the metaverse is real time. And these dangers happen so fast. Moderation really has to be thought about in a different way. Then there's dangers from bad actors. In today's world, we're very familiar with fraudsters, hackers, con artists. We're familiar with identity theft. Well, in the metaverse, identity theft actually becomes virtual impersonation. People in the metaverse will be interacting through avatars that are, they'll start out cartoony, but they'll become photorealistic. They will be your identity. And now you have to worry, well, what if somebody hijacks or duplicates your avatar? They could pretend to be you. Or what if they're pretending to be your coworker or a family member? They could look like you, they can sound like you. And so virtual impersonation becomes this new risk vector. There's a lot of concern that there will be phishing campaigns where corporate espionage will be, somebody just looks and acts and sounds like a coworker and is asking you questions about something, and you don't realize, no, that's not the person that you actually think that they are. And so the solution is platform security. Identity verification is going to be critical, even more critical in the metaverse than it is on today's online platforms. Because if you're interacting with somebody face to face in an immersive world, and you can't trust that they are the person that they look like and sound like, you're not going to trust that world, and the metaverse will fail. So the third risk of the metaverse is the danger from big tech, and this is the one that I really focus the most on in my work. And it's the one that's the most different than the ones previously, and I'll go through why. But my big worry is that the metaverse will give large platforms unparalleled power and influence over people, over society, and I'll go into this in detail. But the solution, I believe, is regulation. Otherwise, we will end up going down the same kind of path we went with social media, where we have all these unexpected consequences, but actually far worse than we've seen with social media. So in talking about the dangers from big tech, it's not the technology of the metaverse that I think that we should fear. It's the power that metaverse platforms could have over the lives of ordinary people. And it's really helpful to look at the lessons learned from social media. So social media, if you go back 15 years, we all believed it was a utopian technology, and for good reason. Everybody believed it would give a voice to the voiceless, bring people together, reduce cultural barriers, create this modern public square with healthy debate, across borders and, of course, boundaries. And social media did all those things, and it still does all those things. And yet 15 years later, we've seen this kind of utopian vision have this kind of dystopian outcomes where social media has pretty well been shown by a lot of studies that it is polarizing society, spreading misinformation, reducing trust in science and facts, reducing trust in institutions, radicalizing populations. It's doing a lot of things that we could say, social media has been destructive to society. And it's not just researchers who think social media is destructive to society. Pew Research did a poll, I think, about 18 months ago of Americans, and they found 64% of Americans view social media as damaging to society. I don't think that when people set out to create this technology, they expected they were going to create something that most people think is destructive to society. And yet that's what social media, that's how it's currently perceived. And there's a lot of evidence that that's what it is. So why did that happen? Well, it wasn't the technology that caused these problems. It was the business models. And so it's worth looking at what the business models are of social media to see what we can learn about the potential dangers of the metaverse. So the business models of social media was simple: sell advertising. Nothing to worry about. Long history of selling advertising. We've have decades and decades of selling print advertising, radio, television advertising. Nobody was really concerned when social media took that turn, or very few people were concerned. The problem is that we were wrong, because there was a single very significant twist, which is that social media allowed targeted advertising, because social media is a bidirectional medium. And so in social media, the business model is really about tracking and profiling users and selling targeted influence. And so in social media, that means tracking and profiling means tracking where you click and what you buy and who your friends are, and then creating user profiles for segmenting populations, breaking people up into groups, and then selling targeted influence. And selling targeted influence on social media means targeted ads, targeted news, and targeted content. And then it means selling that influence to the highest bidder. And then there's this last piece, which is using the same targeted content to increase engagement on their own platforms so they can do even better at tracking and profiling. And that's what created this destructive cycle of society, where these companies competing against each other have gotten better and better and better at tracking and profiling and selling influence, and tracking and profiling and selling influence, and splitting groups into populations, splitting populations into subpopulations, and segmenting and polarizing society. And so it went to a place that really nobody expected, and the business models are really the core of the problem. So now let's look at the metaverse. Well, what about the metaverse? Should we assume an advertising business model? There's lots of other potential business models for the metaverse that aren't advertising, but I believe we need to assume that advertising is going to be a big part of the metaverse. Already, one of the largest current metaverse platforms is a platform called Roblox. It's for kids. It's about 50 million kids use it in these immersive worlds, and Roblox just announced that sometime this year they're going to roll out an advertising business model, immersive advertising. And I'm not picking on them; they're doing it first. I expect every immersive metaverse platform to adopt an advertising business model, unless there's guardrails that guide them in different directions. Now, there are people who say, well, don't worry about it. Metaverse is going to be just like social media, an advertising business model. It's just in 3D. 3D, we know that there's lots of problems with social media, but they're going to be the same in the metaverse in 3D. And I say, no, there's actually also a twist. The metaverse is different than social media because it's real time. The metaverse is an adaptive medium, and that adaptive medium creates entirely new vectors for dangers that really we need to protect against. So the metaverse business model will be first tracking and profiling users, but it'll be far more extensive, and I'll go through why. But when you're in this somebody else's immersive world, you step into their world, their ability to track and profile you will be far more intimate than where you click. And then selling targeted influence. But influence in these immersive worlds will be far more impactful, and I'll go through that. But there's this last piece, which is because it's a real-time medium, AI will be used to optimize this influence in real time. That creates what I look at as a dystopian feedback loop, where advertising in the metaverse or propaganda in the metaverse really can be incredibly persuasive, even manipulative, and we need to just see that before it happens. And so let's look at the different pieces. So tracking and profiling users, social media, we track where you click, what you buy, who your friends are. In the metaverse, whether I'm in a virtual world or I'm in an augmented world, metaverse platforms will be able to track where you go, what you do, and who you're with. If I'm walking down the street in a virtual shopping mall or walking down a real street with augmented reality glasses, the platform will know where I am, who I'm with. They'll even know what direction I'm looking. And when I look in a store window, the platforms will know, oh, they're looking in this store window. In fact, they'll know how long my gaze lingers as I go through my day. They will know, they'll track my gait. They'll know where I slow down, where I speed up, be able to assess my interest as I navigate my world. They'll track my posture. My posture at every moment will indicate my emotions and my interests as I go through my life, whether it's in a fully simulated world or the real world. And then they will be monitoring my facial expressions to track my emotions. Already, the latest devices that came out from Meta last year and just came out at CES last week from other manufacturers, they all monitor facial expressions. And they're doing that to assess your emotions. And there's a good reason they're doing it. There's a positive reason, which is if they can monitor your facial expressions, then the avatar that represents you in these worlds can have facial expressions. And that increases empathy in person-to-person interactions. It makes things more real. It actually makes the metaverse more human. But those facial expressions can be used for lots of other things because they can be tracking how you feel every moment of the day just from your facial expressions and by monitoring your vocal inflections. And they will also very likely be monitoring your vital signs. The current devices and future devices will monitor heart rate, respiration rate, blood pressure, pupil dilation, potentially even EEG, your brain signals. People think that's far in the future. It's not. Smartwatches already do a lot of this. There's already companies who have built these technologies into earbuds instead of smartwatches, and all of these companies are thinking about these type of vital signs. And there's good reasons for it. If you're going to do exercise activities or health activities inside the metaverse, these are useful signals. But if they're used for other things, it's again very, very dangerous. And so metaverse platforms, unlike any type of technology we've seen to date, will be able to track and profile how you act, how you behave during your entire day, whether you're in a virtual or augmented world. They will also be able to track and profile how you feel while you're doing it. Thousands of interactions each day, how you felt, your emotions while doing it. This is dangerous. I mean, metaverse platforms will be able to monitor your whole life, what you do, say, experience, and feel. And then they'll be able to store this data and build behavioral models using predictive AI so that they know so much about what you do throughout your day and how you respond during your day. They'll be able to build predictive models that predict what you're going to do next, or even know what to put into your world to get you to do something that they want you to do next. They'll also be able to build emotional models using predictive AI to steer how you feel. Based on all this data they have about how you normally feel in response to thousands of interactions each day. And so this is clearly a privacy concern. But there's also this issue, well, what will they use this information for? And we can guess that they'll use it to sell targeted influence because the advertising business model is currently the dominant big tech business model. And so in the metaverse, selling targeted influence, advertising and propaganda is not going to be flat ads and videos like we get fed to us on social media. Advertising and propaganda will be immersive experiences, promotional experiences that change the world around you for promotional purposes. They'll be injected into your world to influence you, and they'll be adaptive. They'll be able to adapt in real time to your behaviors and emotions for optimized influence. So let me give you an example of what this could be like. So imagine you're walking down the street in the metaverse. It could be a virtual street in a fully simulated world, or the real world augmented with virtual content. And so let's say I'm walking down the street and I pass a young couple having a conversation about some great new restaurant they went to, or a new car that they just bought, or even a new movie that they just saw. Right. And maybe I overhear 20, 30 seconds of that conversation. And I think, oh, that sounds like a really good car. I should check it out. And I keep walking, and I'm influenced by overhearing this exchange. And I believe it to be an authentic encounter among people in this world. And what I don't realize is that no, that was a targeted promotional experience that was put into my surroundings on behalf of some third party. It was a virtual product placement. It was a virtual product placement, and it was highly targeted. Only I saw that couple walking in front of me having that conversation. Other people in the same metaverse could have seen something else. It was designed for me. Very likely the age, gender, ethnicity, clothing, speaking style of that couple was all chosen by AI to maximize its promotional influence on me based on profile data about me. An AI knows what would influence me best, and it chose all those things strategically. Even the dialogue between that couple that I was overhearing is very likely to be custom crafted based on my personal interests and values and personality and previous history of interactions. And it's very likely that this could influence me deeply. That 30-second overhearing could influence me deeply, and without guardrails, without regulation, I might not even ever have the right to know that was a promotional experience. I might just walk away and think, oh, I just overheard, some other people in this world, and sounds like a cool car. It sounds like exactly the type of car I was looking for that they were talking about. And I might not realize, no, that was put there for me to overhear, and it was very carefully crafted. So that's clearly dangerous. And all of these capabilities are getting closer and closer to being possible. And it's also, we have to realize that this is the metaverse. It's real time, which means it could be interactive as well. And so imagine this same virtual couple, but now realize how powerful a metaverse platform can get. While I'm walking behind this couple, the platform is also monitoring my gaze direction, monitoring my pupil dilation, monitoring my blood pressure. And so it knows the instant I start paying attention to that couple, the instant I hear them talking about a car and my gaze just glances, oh, the platform now knows, okay, he's paying attention. And now it starts crafting the conversation to draw me in as it senses my involuntary reactions. And so maybe this couple's talking about a new movie and they mention an actor that I really like. And as soon as they mention that actor, maybe the platform detects that my pupils dilate a little bit or my blood pressure changes a little bit. And so they talk more about that actor because they know, oh, like this is, again, AI is running this conversation, targeting me. Maybe they then mention that this is a horror film. And I don't really like horror films, so it detects that my blood pressure maybe dropped a little bit. I was less interested, and so they quickly change they adjust the conversation and say, "Well, it's a horror film, but it's not really that scary. It's more sci-fi." And so again, what's happening is I'm becoming an unwilling participant in this promotional conversation that I'm just that's adapting itself to me in real time. And I have no idea. And that's the power of these immersive worlds, is that targeted influence will be these type of experiences, fully interactive. We're not talking about pop-up ads and videos anymore. We're talking about giving a platform the ability to change the world that we see on behalf of a sponsor. And it won't just be for product marketing. It could be for propaganda, ideology, disinformation, anything. It could be very, very dangerous, which again is why this technology needs to be regulated. And again, it's instead of just overhearing dialogue, it's worth also thinking about the fact that I could actually be engaged by an artificial agent, an avatar controlled by AI that looks just like everyone else in the world. And so imagine I'm in a virtual coffee house and somebody at the next table, strikes up a conversation, and I, assume it's another customer, but it's a virtual spokesperson. It's an AI generated avatar that looks like everybody else, but it has a promotional agenda, and it draws me into a conversation, starts out friendly, but it steers me towards some product or service or idea that it wants to influence me about. And it's going to be very skilled because it's going to have access to my history, my interests, my hobbies, my purchasing history, my personality, and it will be monitoring my vital signs in real time. So it could be adjusting its tactics based on how my subtle reactions. What chance do I have in this type of world? And I say that because we know that AI can already can beat the world's best chess player and poker player and Go player, and can beat the best players at Stratego by bluffing. What chance does a consumer have with an AI that's trying to persuade you to buy something you don't need? It's crafting dialogue that it knows is going to be work well on you, and it's monitoring your blood pressure to monitor your reactions. I think we're going to be persuaded, and so this immersive influence in these worlds, I like to think of it in two categories: virtual product placements and virtual spokespeople. Virtual product placements are just these targeted experiences that can be put into your world. And they could be indistinguishable from authentic encounters. I might not know what is real and what is targeted. And virtual spokespeople, AI-controlled avatars that can engage you in conversation. They could be indistinguishable from authentic members of the world, and they can have access to your data profile, and they could be analyzing your emotions in real time. These tactics could pitch you more skillfully than anything we've seen before, which is why, again, I think it needs to be really carefully regulated. People often ask, well, will you really be fooled by virtual spokespeople? Will you really not be able to tell the difference or not? This is a study that was just done last year by Lancaster University and UC Berkeley, where they looked at AI-generated faces to see, can people tell the difference? And you could ask, well, which of these faces was generated by AI as a virtual person? And it turns out they're all virtual people. None of these are real people. None of these are real girls. They're all created by AI. And it turns out that that they've shown that virtual people are now indistinguishable. We humans can't tell the difference between an AI-created person and a real person anymore. And by 2030, I'm sure that it's not going to get better. But the scary thing about this study was that while we can't tell the difference, when they asked, which of these people do you trust more, virtual people were perceived as more trustworthy. So of course, advertisers are going to use them. We can't tell the difference, but we somehow inherently trust the virtual people more. And then the question is, well, will you be fooled by dialogue from a virtual spokesperson? A year ago, people were telling me, oh, it's a long time before dialogue is going to be convincing. I'm sure everybody is familiar with ChatGPT by now, which is now already producing convincing dialogue. I asked it last year that how would it persuade someone to buy a Tesla Model 3? And ChatGPT in 10 seconds cranked this out. It said, oh, the Tesla Model 3 has advanced features such as an electric powertrain and impressive performance. You should consider the environmental benefits of driving an electric vehicle too, as well as the potential cost savings on fuel over time. Additionally, you should consider the growing network of Tesla superchargers, which make it convenient to recharge the car's battery on long trips. Okay, so that's today's AI generating a sales pitch. 10 years from now, it will be a lot more convincing and smooth. And imagine if 10 years from now, this AI is not just trained on documents, it's actually trained on human psychology and sales tactics. It will be if you're trying to build a system to sell advertisements, to sell products. Imagine if the AI was trained on your specific personality. ChatGPT didn't know who I was, didn't know anything about me. It created this. What if it knew about me? What if it crafted that dialogue based on my personality and my interests? And what if it was adapting its tactics based on my blood pressure while we were having a verbal conversation? The fact is, the metaverse could become the most dangerous tool of persuasion and manipulation that we humans have ever created. It will track everything you do and say and feel. Could generate detailed behavioral profiles and emotional profiles. It could alter the world around you without you even knowing it. And it can engage you in conversation without you realizing you're talking to an AI. And because it has so many sensors, it could create these real-time feedback loops to adapt itself. I think a lot about these feedback loops where you, the human, are the one in the system, and the AI agent is trying to manipulate you. I won't go into detail in this, but I will point people towards a white paper that I published recently called The Metaverse from Marketing to Mind Control for the Future Marketing Institute. And if you're interested in this topic, I go into detail there. But I really want to get to this point, which is, well, do we need guardrails for the metaverse? There's all these positive things. There's all these really scary negative things. Can we put guardrails in place so we can have the positives without the negatives? I think we do need guardrails. Interactive forms of advertising are of influence is not something we've dealt with before, not when it was immersive, real time, and mediated by AI. So what can we regulate? Well, for tracking and profiling, when tracking and profiling behaviors, where you go, what you do, where you look, first thing is transparency. Platforms need to reveal what is being tracked and when it's tracked. If I'm walking down the street and I look in a store window, I need to be reminded, hey, somebody's watching me do that. I at least need to be informed and know that it's being tracked. But even more importantly, there should be no profiling, meaning this information is needed in real time in order to simulate your experiences, but they don't need to store it across your whole day or week or year. They don't need to store this data to know exactly what you did, where you were, what you looked at for days and weeks and months and years, and then process that data. So no profiling would protect people a lot. Same thing with emotional data, facial recognition, facial expressions, vocal inflections, posture, gait. Transparency, if they're looking at the micro expressions on your face or the subtle blood patterns on you need to be informed that they're doing that, what they're using it for, and there should be no profiling. They shouldn't be able to store your emotional data across your whole day in life, because if they can store your emotional data, they'll be storing how you reacted to thousands of situations every single day, and then they'll be able to know how to use that information to evoke similar responses. And finally, I think they should ban the use of vital signs for anything other than health and wellness. I don't think anybody would like to be in an interactive advertisement that's using their blood pressure to adjust its tactics. Certainly for health and wellness applications, but not for anything promotional. And then when it comes to targeted influence, virtual product placements, these are changes to your world on behalf of a sponsor. If a platform puts something into the world that only you see, that's targeted at you, it needs to look different. You need to be able to know, to be able to see the difference between something that was put there and something that was that's just an organic, serendipitous part of your experience. If I'm walking down the street and I see somebody drinking a Red Bull, and then I see somebody else drinking a Red Bull, and then somebody else, and I'm thinking, wow, Red Bull's popular around here. If that was targeted, I need to know that. Those Red Bulls need to look different than if they were just organic parts of my world. And in addition, platforms should reveal who the paying third party is that put these into my world. With virtual spokespeople, AI-driven AI agents, an artificial agent that has to look different, should look different than anyone else, an authentic member of the world. And if they're going to engage you in a promotional conversation, they should have to reveal themselves up front. Hey, I'm here to talk to you about this product. Just like if you walk into a Best Buy, the people who work in the store are wearing store shirts. If somebody's walking around that store pretending to be a customer and striking up a fake conversation, you would think that that's predatory. Well, that could be done at scale in the metaverse unless there's regulations saying no. A virtual spokesperson has to identify itself, and it should also have to identify who the third party is it's representing and what its agenda is. Should have to reveal, hey, I'm here to tell you about Tesla Model 3, and not be predatory. I also think that should ban conversational agents that adapt their tactics based on your sensed emotions in real time. That's dangerous. And finally, they should ban the use of conversational agents at all that could have a promotional influence on kids. Kids are actually particularly vulnerable. They already have a hard time telling the difference between something that's authentic and something that's an advertisement. Imagine that you're a kid in the metaverse and a big giant teddy bear walks up to you and strikes up a conversation and follows you around and is really fun and is just casually telling you about some new brand of cereal or some new toy that you should convince your parents to buy you. If you're a kid, you should. It doesn't even matter if this teddy bear looks different. They should not be allowed to put AI-controlled promotional agents into your world. So if we do these things, we could really reduce these risks, tracking and profiling users, transparency, you need to know what's tracked, limitations, they shouldn't be allowed to profile and store your data over time, selling targeted influence, you should be able to see what is promotional and what is authentic. You shouldn't be deceived between the two, and there should be limitations. They shouldn't be allowed to use that on kids, and then they shouldn't be allowed to do this real-time adjustments that can adapt to you and create this dystopian feedback loop. If we do that, we could have a safe metaverse, and a safe metaverse is good for consumers. It's also good for the industry. If people don't trust these environments, it will get the same kind of bad reputation that social media has. And I don't think any of these large companies want to repeat that same problem where their value of their companies were cut in half because they lost trust. And so I do think regulation is actually a positive thing for everybody, consumers, industry, content makers, and it's really just about protecting consumers, not about restricting creativity. And so, concluding remarks, I really do believe the metaverse will happen because it's how we were meant to perceive our world. I do believe it will transform society, mostly as an augmented mixed reality, but certainly people will spend a lot of time in purely virtual worlds. And I really think that in the 2030s, we will really see a big change. But the problems could be worse than we're seeing with today's social media unless we put guardrails in place. And I really think now is the time to push for regulation, which is why I speak about it often, because the business models haven't been established yet in the metaverse. I often get the question from regulators. Regulators will say to me, "You're talking to me about the metaverse. We can't even figure out how to fix social media." And my answer is, well, you waited 10 years too late to regulate social media, and those business models are already well established. And the largest companies in the world depend on business practices that are very hard for you now to say are not legal. But the metaverse, those business practices aren't in place yet. If regulation was put in place in the next year or two, then these large metaverse platforms that emerge, instead of competing on who can create the most influential, persuasive targeting to sell to advertisers, instead of competing on that, they'll compete on who can create the most engaging experiences that are the most educational and informative and creative and artistic, and compete for consumers that way through different business models. So I really do think the metaverse can be a very, very positive thing. But I really think that we should learn from social media that without guardrails, it's very likely not to get there to a positive place on its own. And so that's the metaverse is coming. It could be dangerous. I'm Louis Rosenberg, and my email is up here if anybody does want to contact me at some point.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Louis, for that wonderful presentation. We have a lot of Q&A, so it's really, really great.
Will we have a choice if we are active participants in the future metaverse?
That's a great question. It's a good question to come first because it's so important. Because there are, one of the defenses is, well, if somebody thinks the metaverse is dangerous, they just won't use it. And I think that's a false choice because eventually more and more services will be available in the metaverse, and people will feel like they don't have a choice. And in fact, one of the reasons why I do believe that the augmented metaverse will be the one that takes off and really takes over society is because it will follow an adoption curve that I think is actually very similar to the iPhone's adoption curve. And, back in the day, everybody had flip phones. Nobody thought they needed anything more than making phone calls and sending text messages. Nobody thought they'd spend $1,000 on a phone. And then Apple launched the iPhone, and the iPhone started to create new capabilities. And eventually you start to feel like, well, if I don't have a smartphone, I'm missing out on content, I'm missing out on capabilities, I'm at a disadvantage. And so within just 5 or 6 years, the world almost completely transitioned from smartphones to much more expensive, from flip phones to much more expensive smartphones that they didn't even know they needed. And I think the same thing is going to happen as we transition from smartphones to eyewear, because when eyewear is available and people are walking down the street and there's just content everywhere, and you walk past a store and there's specials just pop out of the store, the restaurant, you see the restaurant specials, and if you just have a smartphone and you're missing out on all this content, you will not feel like you have a choice. And so I do think that the adoption profile could be very similar, 5 to 6 years from when the first, quality, low cost, good, stylish looking product comes out. I think people will feel pressured to use these products.
In terms of the immersive experience, do you think this would be closer to Neuromancer or to Snow Crash?
So again, I think it's more, when you're talking about fully virtual worlds, I think, I think sci-fi will influence. There'll be people who create worlds that emulate a lot of sci-fi worlds, and it will be entertainment experiences. It'll be fanciful. It'll be a wide range of these experiences. But I think I really do think that most of the day that people experience is going to be lightweight eyewear, virtual content all around us, and these mixed reality experiences. And I think we're just going to start seeing, we're really going to start seeing hints of that this year. Over the last 3 or 4 months, most of the big manufacturers started to roll out headsets that have what they call full color pass through, where you can put on these bulky headsets, but you could see the real world at the same time pretty well. And so that they can get developers to start being creative with adding virtual content to the real world. And Apple is rumored to have something even more sophisticated that's going to be at least announced in June. And so I do think that by the end of this year, people will really be seeing that the metaverse will be this mixed world of real and virtual. And it'll be somewhat different than we've seen in really any sci-fi from the past.
How do we ensure metaverse-free zones and prevent pressure from whichever side to reduce or remove them? Someone could, affordable health insurance, make an argument that would say you must keep your gear on.
No, there's so many really tricky issues. As I mentioned, I work with a number of groups that really talk a lot with regulators and talk a lot with policymakers. The Responsible Metaverse Alliance is one. The XR Safety Initiative is another. They both do good work, and this idea of that people should have a right to non-immersive alternatives, I think it's could ultimately be almost a human right. Meaning, if there are certain things that you can only do in an immersive environment, then you don't have a choice. For these days, you don't really have a choice but to use the internet. For a long time there was always you had an alternative, but now there are certain agencies, certain organizations. The only way that you're going to fill out forms or turn in documents or is through the internet, and I think that's fine as long as there's not a divide where there are people who just don't have access. But the metaverse takes that to a new level. There can be entire environments that you could not see. And if the only way to go to the DMV is virtually, it's not a choice anymore. And I think that regulators should certainly have a long period of time where people have to have a choice. And if they don't have a choice, it has to be readily accessible to everybody.
Why did Google give up on Google Glass?
Google took a risk on Google Glass, and I commend them for that. They tried something. They were clearly early, and they clearly were testing something out and hadn't really thought through the social implications. I think they were not expecting the social backlash that A, that people looked weird wearing them, B, that there was a camera and people felt like it was invasive, and they were a decade too early for those social impacts. Now today cameras are everywhere. Cameras are on every smartphone. People, there's less people are a little bit less uneasy. Although Meta now has these glasses with cameras on them, and people are uneasy. So there are these, getting the social issues right, so people feel comfortable, feel like it looks, stylish, and feel like it's accepted is not easy. I do think that we will see products come out in the next year or two where those barriers come down. If I was to bet, my bet would be on Apple, being the most sensitive to those issues and rolling out products that don't hit those same barriers.
What are the dangers of Web3 crypto digital assets based business model for the metaverse?
Web3 and basically blockchain-based content storage is going to be part of the metaverse, meaning having, being able to have digital assets that are stored outside of centralized control and can be shared across different environments. I do think will happen, but I don't think it's going to solve all the world's problems. I mean, a lot of Web3 people think that the decentralized, blockchain-based platforms are going to mean that there aren't these big corporations like Meta and Apple and Microsoft and Google who have deep control over the metaverse. I think it's aspirational to try to protect the public that way, but I do think that I don't know that blockchain so simply solves those problems. And so, to me, the biggest risk, honestly, of blockchain is there's a large group of people who think, oh, don't worry about the dangers of the metaverse. Blockchain's going to solve all that, and I think that's wishful thinking. And so, certainly, when I talk to regulators, I say, yeah, blockchain's going to help, but we need policy to protect people.
Is it realistic to think that any serious attempt to deal with the threats and risks of the metaverse can coexist with a decentralized platform?
A lot of the threats and risks will be addressed by having very clear identity, persistent identity, and it's not yet clear if persistent identity is going to be something that really gets enforced by a centralized platform or by a decentralized platform. And when I talk about persistent identity, I mean if you go to a big lecture hall in person with 1,000 people, it's very unlikely that somebody is going to stand up during the middle of that lecture and do something offensive. If you did the same thing online, it's very likely that could happen, because the difference is identity. If people have persistent identity that follows them, they behave really differently than they do in a lot of online environments where they don't have that type of identity, and so there's no consequences. And so, because platform moderation of behavior is going to be so hard in these immersive worlds, the only way to really create a safe world, in safe in terms of person-on-person behaviors, is going to be with some level of persistent identity, and that's either going to be some brilliant blockchain-based solution that really gets adopted widely, or it will mean that these large platform providers, whether it's a Google or an Apple or a Microsoft or a Meta, enforces it with their own closed worlds.
So if you're going to have regulations of metaverse platforms, who would oversee this, and what would be suitable penalties for violations? Yeah,
so really good questions, really difficult questions, in that the metaverse clearly crosses jurisdictions. The metaverse could be global. I I really think it's up to individual governments to take a first stab. Certainly, European countries are really looking quite seriously at putting at formulating policies around the metaverse. There are regulatory groups in the U.S. looking as well. My guess is they'll go slower than Europe. I've talked with regulators in the U.S. and Europe and Australia and New Zealand, and I do think the thing that makes us really different than, say, 15 years ago around social media is the fact that regulators can look back at what happened with social media and realize they acted too slowly and they didn't really consider the implications. And so I think regulators are starting to realize that if they can put relatively simple policies in place that help guide the business models in away from these dangerous directions, then the industry won't compete and push each other in these dangerous directions. And it actually will be easier to enforce because there will be the violators will be a small number of outliers, as opposed to what you have today, where regulations are coming in after the fact, like GDPR, and then everybody had to change their policies, and so there's a lot of violators because they're just used to doing things a different way, and it's harder. But how it gets enforced and what the penalties are still open questions and really difficult. But I do think that there's more momentum than there would have been had we not seen what happened with social media.
Okay. What might be the impact, positive or negative, on mental health? And also, pairing with that, you mentioned regulating AI that responds to emotion. Would that be across the board, or do you see potential exceptions? Hopefully that's not too big of a double question.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you raise the issue of mental health, and like a lot of these things, it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of work going on using virtual environments for therapeutic purposes, for positive outcomes in a clinical setting. And there's a lot of research that shows that these virtual environments can have a positive impact. At the same time, there's also research on these virtual environments are really addictive and can create these other these new mental challenges. All the things that we see. There's a lot of impacts around self-image with today's social media, Instagram or TikTok, or where people, especially young girls, really have mental challenges that are caused by these new technologies. I think those are also likely to happen in the metaverse as well. So I think when it comes to mental health, there's going to be positives and negatives, and it's unclear which side it's going to which is going to be worse or which is going to be better.
Okay, and we're going to wrap up with one last question here. Are there any documentaries on this topic that you like or recommend?
There's not that much on the dangers of the metaverse. It's really very, very, it's really only been over the last year or two that people have been kind of even willing to talk about it, because before that, people felt like the metaverse was, a million years away. And like, why tell me about the dangers of something that seems a million years away? there are a number of documentaries I know that are in production now that are going to be coming out in the next couple of years or later this year and next year that are about about the metaverse and really about the dangers as well. I did a short, it's like 15-minute sort of documentary for a group called More Perfect Union about the dangers of the metaverse that's online. But if anyone wants pointers to information, you certainly can email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share any information I can if people are interested in dangers of the metaverse, potential regulatory solutions, or also the positive aspects of the metaverse. I do think they go hand in hand, which is the reason for regulation is to enable a positive metaverse. Yeah, if I didn't think there was, the metaverse could really have this positive impact, then I would be saying like we just shouldn't do it at all. But I do think it's inevitable and it can have a positive impact. But a lot of thoughtful people have to come up with good ideas for how to keep it safe.
Great. Well, thanks, Louis. Thanks for your talk and answering all these questions.
We have upcoming speakers. So for the rest of this year, so if you're interested in becoming a speaker for ACM Chicago, please let us know. So you have the contact information there, vice chair at chicagoacm.org and chair at chicagoacm.org. And like I said earlier, a copy of these slides will be provided to you as well as the recording. So we're also looking for volunteers. So if you have any of these particular skills, also please keep in contact with us. And thank you very all for attending this evening.